Nothing in this podcast is meant for medical advice. Please discuss your own healthcare with your healthcare providers. Thank you. Welcome to your B-side, your midlife metamorphosis. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Lindsey. Midlife is not a crisis, it's a catalyst to your best life. Join me each week for a dose of mental, physical, and spiritual health, life, grief, adventure, and opportunity. It's time to flip the record over. Welcome to your B-side, your midlife metamorphosis with me, your host, Dr. Amy Lindsey. Today, I'm very excited because I have a special guest with me today who is a badass, a total badass who is revolutionizing healthcare systems and helping doctors and healthcare professionals be who they're supposed to be and strategize and leverage that and be of the utmost service in the world. She is also the co-founder of Health Hives, is a sought-out speaker, and is a podcast host and guest, naturally. She is also one of my dear colleagues and friends who I have the pleasure of having known for the last 6 years. And she also happened to move to Europe within days of me and my family moving to Europe. Please welcome to the podcast, Dr. Megan Walker.
I'm so happy to be here, Amy.
I'm so happy to talk to you. Finally, we got it on the schedule.
Finally.
So I wanted to start out by bringing our listeners to a moment in time in our relationship in January 2025. And I want to paint this picture because it's like a pivotal moment for me.
Yeah.
So as people who listen to the podcast know, in 2025, in January 2025, I fulfilled a lifelong childhood dream of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And it started the year prior when I had my second hip replacement and I fell into a deep depression. And I was like, what the hell am I doing with my life, my business, my health, the whole thing? And through a series of pivots and ricochets and left turns, I ended up in Barcelona, dropping my kiddo off at an elite 3-week soccer camp, or academy rather, while I went to go climb this mountain in Africa. And I show up to drop Henry off at camp, and I see Megan Walker. And she's there with her family. And my first thought was, is that Megan? And then my second thought was, oh, this is where all the cool kids hang out. And then my third thought was, dang, I somehow ended up in the same place in the world at the same time as Megan Walker. I must be doing something right. And that was a pivotal moment.
Credit, Amy.
No, I mean it was like a tell, or it was like a little like sweet moment of like, I had so much respect for you, and I was like, excuse my French. I am living in France right now. If this bitch is here, then this is where it's at, right? I want you to tell everyone how you ended up there on that day. Like, how did you get yourself to Barcelona at an elite soccer camp for your kiddo?
How did I get myself? Yeah, it's a great question. And also, I was sitting across the room and I leaned over to Greg and I was like, I think that is Amy who was in one of my programs, but I also have this theory that there are twins in Europe. And so that I see people all the time who look like people I know here. And I'm like, oh, no, like the world just runs duplicates in different continents. So I had him, anyways, we connected and it was amazing. And I ended up in that room because my daughter Naya also plays soccer, shocker, because that's the story. And she had done a similar academy in North America. And she's like, I want to do it. I want to try it in Barcelona. And we were like, we have 3 kids. This doesn't fit in our life plan, or like with the ease in which we like to operate. Not that there's any ease with 3 kids. And we're like, we're going to just pull our kids out of school. We're going to go to Europe for 3 months. And we're going to have this once in a lifetime opportunity to hang out while Naya does this academy training. And that was like the impetus of why we said yes to going over. And she did that. And we hung out in Barcelona and did our 3 months. And then my husband said to me, are you ready to go home? When you're on vacation, you're 10 days into it and you feel that desire to go back and step into your routine and like the drive and all the things. And I started to cry and I was like, I don't ever want to leave. Like, I feel so at home here. Like, I'm in the right place. Like, the time zone works, like all the things work. I want to live here. He's like, this was not the response. He's like, really? Like, seriously, you want to do this? And I'm like, yeah, no. Like, I want to move to Europe, Greg. I want to pack up the kids. I want to pack up our life. I want to do all the things and I want to move overseas. So that's like the extension of like how we ended up in that room. It was supposed to be this like short-lived thing, and we were using football as this excuse to have this experience. And then it turned into this whole adventure. And here we are.
So you didn't stay in Barcelona. You went back home to Canada, to Toronto. Yeah. And then what was that conversation? Or then how did you get to the point where you were living in Barcelona?
Yeah. So we went home. We talked about wanting to do it. We, interestingly enough, like picked up Naya after she was at the same camp, and we went to Tanzania and we climbed base camp at Kilimanjaro. We're not as ambitious as you, with our 3 kids, and we were in Africa, and then we were in Dubai, and we were traveling. We've rounded out that trip. And what got really clear for us in that time was we really valued the exposure that our kids had to different cultures, to different languages, to the struggle of travel. And it was so apparent to us how much easier it was to see the world being in Europe as opposed to being in North America. And it just broke open for us all the elements and areas of our life where we are like, we want something different, not something better. We want something different. And the way we have been living our life, which has been awesome. And I've always, you've known me a long time, like tried to live in congruence with my values and what's important to me. We suddenly realized like there's this whole slew of our identity as a family that is not getting honored. We wanted to be able to travel. And we didn't want to travel into the United States as much. We wanted to expand our family and our children's exposure in particular to more than North America. But North America is easy when you live there, and it's less expensive when you've got 3 kids. And like there's really practical reasons why we kind of travel in this like up and down north-south vertical when you are there. And so we just started to reverse engineer like what has to be true in order for us to make this jump and make this happen. We knew we loved Barcelona. We had spent some time in Madrid. And the irony is like literally as we record this today, I was just talking to our accountant and our tax people, and they're like, you're in the worst financial jurisdiction in the EU. And I'm like, okay. So, we might have to reevaluate those things again, but we kind of knew that that's what we were signing up for, is we were moving away from the very secure, very predictable experience that was our lives. Our kids had just gotten into amazing schools in Toronto. Like our friends thought we were absolutely bonkers. They're like, you're living the Canadian dream. Like, what are you doing? And it's not that, we're too good for this. It was not the energy at all. It was like the privilege of having that and seeing that, and then recognizing that the resilience and the education and the skill sets we wanted our kids to have when they left on the other side of their time with us was not going to be found in this idyllic, safe street in Toronto, at least for our family. It was going to come by conquering these new experiences for us as individuals, as parents, but for our kids. And if we suddenly did not know how to parent in the safety and security of where we lived, and we were like, okay, we're just going to do it. And it has not, and it probably will not be easy. And yet we're all in for it.
Yeah. Shake things up a little bit.
Shake things up.
Shake things up a little bit. I remember there was a time, and this is also another story related to you, believe it or not, when I was pursuing potentially opening a brick and mortar clinic in LA. And I also wanted to move there with Henry. And for the purposes of shaking things up for him, because I just felt like, with my oldest son, we moved him around all over the place. We were living in New York, and then we were living in Seattle. And that kid built resilience. And I saw how all that change built so much resilience for him. His ability to connect with new people, his ability to find common ground with people, his ability to adjust and adapt to new difficult situations. And I was watching my youngest son just a little too cozy in his independent school in West Seattle and his elite soccer club and the community. And I was desperate for a change of scenery. And I also wanted to try out a new business venture in LA. And so Henry and I went down to LA, and he was, of course, in some elite soccer camp. And I was there scouting the area and working. And I was in a program of yours, and you and I were on a call. And I said two things in like almost the same sentence. I said, I'm in LA. I'm looking at opening in-person brick and mortar. And then almost like 5 seconds later, I said, oh, and I have this dream. I want to live in Europe, in Spain or France, and work from Europe. And you said, okay, hold up. You've got a values conflict going on. And you totally called me out on it. And it's obvious which one I chose, right? But at the time, the core value for me and my family was there, if that makes sense. That
Right.
the idea is that I wanted to shake things up for me and my kid a little bit. My soul was desperately calling for something different. And I wanted to see my kid struggle, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was like, let's plop your ass down in Spain or France and have you learn a new language and have to deal with people from all over the world and all over Europe and get away from your comfort zone and see what happens.
My husband and I joked when we were younger, when our kids were younger, also we were younger, that we don't know how to build resilient kids in the absence of trauma. So we had both grown up with like divorced parents and like messiness, and we credited that experience to us being resilient, capable adults. And we were at a complete loss on how to raise our children to be like that in the absence of ourselves getting divorced. And it really took some maturity in life to realize that resilience can come from trauma, but it does not have to come from trauma, which is a really important lesson to learn as a parent. And it will be built by doing hard things. And so once like all these things started to click and we really realized that this was a skill set we wanted our kids to have, then traveling and moving was kind of a no-brainer for us. And I'm envious of, this is so common in the United States. And I don't even know if Americans realize this, but you guys move a lot and you have the freedom to move a lot into entirely different places. Like if you're living in Colorado, that is so different than if you're like, I'm in Atlanta or St. Augustine, or like you want to have change, you can just change without having to, immigrate or like and you do move. Like I love talking to Uber drivers when I'm in the States for events and conferences. I'm like, where do you live? They're like, well, I live here, but I came from here. And everyone moves around. Canadians don't move. And so we were really aware of like, you're in Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, if you want to be in a city. And then the land transfer tax is so high just inside of Toronto that like the financial burden to move is enormous. So there's something stagnant to me about staying in one space forever because no one has anywhere to go because you drive 2 hours north and it's just going to snow for 12 months of the year. So it's a very enviable part of United States culture that you move around. So I kind of wanted to be a part of it, but I wanted to move to Europe.
But not in the States.
But not in the States.
The value, but not the location.
Yeah. And also like, I grew up going to Florida. I understand the culture of North America, the United States, Canada, whatever the case may be. And I wanted to step outside of that with my family.
Yeah. Well, when we dropped him off in Barcelona for that same soccer academy that your daughter was doing, I was a little worried that his school would be upset because he was basically doing remote. They had to create a remote way for him to keep up in school. And what was awesome is they were all on board. Like nobody fought us. In fact, they developed programs specific to him, specifically to his experience. So his math and physics teacher was like going through the physics of soccer with him. And the art teacher was going through, of course, Gaudi. And, He was in Spanish class, so that was easy. And I just really valued how much those educators got on board that understanding something like travel is one of the best educations you can ever get, and that nobody was trying to make him stay in school for those 3 weeks. And to your point earlier, when you were talking about travel, I grew up that way. My dad, he took us all over the United States. We didn't go overseas, but he took us all over the United States, and he would say time and time again, and he would take us out of school and get us in trouble all the time. And he would say, travel's the best education. You have to meet new people. You have to see new places. You have to build those connections. And I, in my first marriage, used to be blamed all the time for always having a plane ticket in my pocket. And I would say, well, tough shit. This is me, right? And clearly that one didn't work out. And in my current marriage, like John's all on board, and we are living separately most of the time right now because he's not able to move here full time with us. And so we as adults, and so the point I'm getting to is as adults, you have to model resilience and you have to model bucking status quo. And, you know, it's funny, I didn't anticipate this to be the question, but a lot of our adult friends at home are asking if we're still married. Like a lot of us think we broke up, we split up, we're separated. We're like, oh yeah, no.
This is like the best.
This is the best, actually.
Yeah.
But I think that as an adult and as a parent, modeling bucking the status quo and setting your own rules. And I think that's why I do have like this sort of admiration for you, and personally and professionally, that I've always seen you as somebody, you're not a rule follower. You're always going to be thinking outside of the box. And I love that in your parentship. I'm making up words now.
I know what that word is, but I'm here for it.
Yeah, parentship. That's a new word.
Yep.
Just creative it.
Take
You're
it.
welcome. You're welcome. That you're also modeling that behavior. Can you speak to sort of thinking outside the box, bucking the status quo in your own personal life, professionally? Like we've kind of been talking about it with kids, parenting.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think an important caveat on this is that, like, I don't identify as a rebel because, while I cannot stand rules and I do not like to be held to them, I also don't like to get in trouble. And so I learned at a very young age. My parents were divorced. My parents had joint custody. They lived 4 hours apart. And I was an only child. And I was flown back and forth between my parents when I was starting at the age of 7. And this is, I think, important context for how I grew up, in that I was a fairly precocious kid. And when you fly alone on an airplane, you had to wear this great big pouch around your neck that says UM, that stands for unaccompanied minor. And it is horrifyingly shame-provoking as you are like an 8 or 9-year-old. You feel like a piece of cargo. And I realized really quick it was the same route every single time. And every 2 weeks I flew. And so I realized really quickly that the flight attendants didn't pay that much attention to me as long as I was like alive and in my seat. And what I would do is I would get on the plane, I would take off my badge, and I would chat up the man next to me. And it was almost always a man, and he was a businessman. And this was like Ottawa, Toronto was like a 45-minute flight. And I realized if I chatted him up, they just assumed he was my dad, and they kind of forgot about the thing. And I would just get up off the plane and I would walk out with him. And I was like, oh, I just like reclaimed my independence. And so that from a very young age, I felt and appreciated and craved that level of independence. And again, travel taught me how to be competent. I felt really confident traveling. I knew what to do. And so I'd be at a new school every 2 years. I was in all of these different new environments, and I continued to have reinforced for me that one, I could probably talk my way into or out of anything. So it became a very useful skill for me to leverage. But I got really clear at a really young age that I craved independence and I craved being able to do it my own way. So people telling me how it had to be done, or like trying to hang the around my neck, and I did rebel against that fairly consistently. So that's where it kind of started for me. And then all through school, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. Like that was what I wanted to do, until I realized if I joined the military, I'd have a lot of rules that I had to follow, and I couldn't reconcile that. I was like, I can't I cannot talk my way out of that situation. And through a series of events, found entrepreneurship. And I was like, this is exactly where I need to be. And so my natural inclination when it comes to solving problems is this core belief that there is always a solution and we just have to find it. And the second piece is that it's rare for me to use the word problem. I view it all as a puzzle. It is all just a puzzle to me. And so getting outside and thinking outside the box is to me the only vantage point to finding the solution. You can't read the label inside the bottle. So my most comfortable place is to be hanging outside the box and outside the norm of how it has always been done, because it's so clear to see what happens if we stay in the box. Like there's a million examples of what in the box looks like. So I'm endlessly curious around what life looks like if I get outside of it. We talk about that with our kids, but it was definitely reinforced for me growing up is how do I not have to conform, and how do I not have to be told what to do, which is an interesting thing. I know we were talking about this a bit before when it comes to like having any type of medical license, because that in and of itself represents a very explicit box, and also one that is not easy to talk your way out of.
Yes. Let's talk about that for
Let me drop that segue on the table there.
Yeah, perfect. That was a perfect segue. I want you to talk a little bit about the impetus from going from a licensed naturopathic doctor to an entrepreneur who has built an entire business about helping transform the healthcare industry and helping other doctors and healthcare professionals with their business. Like, what was the impetus for that? Were you just like, I'm tired of this shit and I'm done? Or like, was there a calling?
There was a moment, there was a watershed moment, and I don't always have them. I tend to hang on to things too long. I stay in a place for too long. That is a theme for me. And that is a theme. But I have this routine where if there is a big lottery and I'm somewhere where it's like showcasing what that lottery is, I'll ask myself, what would you do differently in your life if you won this tomorrow? I love asking people that question. And I ask myself that question. And I just finished a long day with patients. I was walking down to grab some Pellegrino from the drugstore, and there was this lottery sign. It was for $60 million. It was a meaningful amount of money. And I was like, what would be different if you won the thing? Because I was standing in line and I always ask the question. And my subconscious came roaring out into the forefront of my mind. It was like, we are done with patients. And I was like, oh. If you'd asked me the week before, it would have been like, we would carry on. Everything would be the same on your, and I went back to my office and I opened my email and I emailed Heather, who works on my team. She's been working with me for 10 years. And I said, Heather, I'm going on sabbatical. And she's like, what? And I said, I'm going on sabbatical. This was June. And I said, as of Labor Day, we need to craft a communication to go to my patients. I'm going to go on sabbatical for 6 months and I better find someone to replace me. And I knew that my sabbatical, I knew I wouldn't go back. But I also knew that there's big things in life where I need to try them out. And I needed to feel what it would feel like to not have patients. That was a big part of my identity and who I was. And what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm a naturopathic doctor and I work in clinic and I understand medicine. And that was a big part of my identity. It was also something I'm really proud of. I worked really hard to build my practice and get through naturopathic medical school. It's not a walk in the park. And so I wasn't ready to just be like, I'm done with this. Let's move on. I'm not flippant. I needed to try it on emotionally. I needed to try it on with my family. I needed to make sure I had this other business at the same time. Can I go all in? And I got to the end of that 6 months and I double checked with myself one more time and checked in with my team. And through a whole series of events, just made the decision I was done. And I made 2 phone calls to the first phone call I made was to my ideal person to take over my practice. And I said, I'm closing my practice. I'd like to sell it to you. And this is the price. And she said, I'll take it. And the next call was to my accountant. And I literally made those 2 calls while walking around the outer part of Epcot Center at Disney World. And by the time we left that evening, I had sold my practice. And so it happened. I was going to say it happened that fast, but it didn't. I spent 6 months on sabbatical from a phase of life. And I talk about this a fair bit. I really believe in the concept of having sabbaticals. And sabbaticals don't always mean just put your feet up or write your book. It's trying on a different identity and a different phase of life. And it's so powerful if you can put yourself in a position to do that. Not all decisions need to be like that. You can try it on and see if you like it. You and I both probably had this mindset. I don't want to speak for you, but like jump in on this. I was like, we're going to move to Europe because guess what? We can move home. Like we can undo this decision. So I think the concept of a sabbatical in any realm of your life is really powerful, but it was the impetus for driving that change.
Hey, this is Dr. Amy Lindsey, your host of Welcome to Your B-Side, your midlife metamorphosis YouTube channel and podcast. If you want to be more involved with my B-Side community, you can join on School. That's SKOOL. You can join my school community. Look me up, Dr. Amy Lindsey. Welcome to Your B-Side and request to join. I love it. So I'm a strong believer in you have to access the present moment and you have to access rest in like a long-term way, where I love what you said about I had to see what life was like without having patients, like without seeing patients all the time and without interacting with them, right? Because it's so much a part of your identity. Who are you if you're not someone seeing patients, right? Who are we, right? One of my most favorite questions to ask people, and you're already answering it, so I'm not even going to bother asking you because you're already asking it, but I ask this to all my clients. I ask this to my patients. I say, who are you without the titles? Who are you if you're not saying, oh, I'm a mother and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a naturopathic doctor and I'm a this and I'm a that and I'm a spouse and I'm whatever. Who are you? And I don't think people stop enough to ask that question. And I think a lot of it is programming and when I'm talking about status quo thinking, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is that from an early age, we're kind of programmed that we're supposed to be something when we grow up that has a title. And we're not really developing that inner core work of identity and discovering who we are. And I also think, capitalism and economics and all these things like trying to feed a family and all this stuff, keeps us in kind of a routine. It keeps us in routine, but interrupting it. Like I deal with a lot of people in midlife and I was like, midlife interrupted. What are we looking at?
Yeah.
Like if you could just stop, like all your bills are paid. It's the lottery question. All your bills are paid. Like no one has any expectations of you. Now what?
It's such a powerful question. It's like the lottery question. It's the same genre. I was talking to a psychologist on a podcast and she said, okay, well, what would you say to those people who would never do this? Like they would never make a big, bold move like this. And I said, I'd stop right there because I think one of the problems is we self-define as either, oh, you're the kind of person who makes a big, bold move, but I'm not. And therefore we default to having to stay in this lane. And I said to her, I think the problem actually comes before that identity piece and that question. And I think that there's something powerful to just asking yourself the big, bold question without having to decide whether or not you're someone who would follow through on it. Because it's in asking the question that you really very quickly par down what's important to you. And I said, so I think everybody should ask the question. If like the number of people have said to me, and I suspect you have something similar, oh my gosh, it's so amazing that you went and did this. And I would never do that. But I wish I could be the kind of person who would do that. And I'm like, you are the kind of person who could go and do that. You can what needs to be true in your life to go and do this? Because you can always undo it. Like it's all available to us. And then they start to go through, well, I have this and I have this and I have this. I'm like, great. What would we need to do with it? And suddenly they're left being, wait, maybe I am the kind of person who can do this. So I think the power comes in just asking the question of like, you could go to Europe. Where would you move to? And then starting to parse down what would have to be true for that to happen. That's an incredibly powerful line of inquiry, especially at this juncture of life. But I just would encourage anyone to listen to not fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I'm not that kind of person. I'll never win the lottery, so this is a pointless question. Or I would never move away from my my mom, or I couldn't because my parents are down the street. Therefore, I will not even contemplate these pieces. The power is in the contemplation. I would not opt out of that. It is the safest thing you can do when it comes to midlife is contemplate what another version might look like and then consider reverse engineering it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have gotten that. I have gotten people, they say, oh my God, you're so lucky. Or, oh my God, that's great. But that sounds, it sounds this way or that way or whatever.
Right.
I could never. Or, oh, I'm going to have to I'm going to have to pick your brain for how I can do it. And I always say, you know what? Sure, I might be able to give you some tips about visas or something, real estate and how that works in France. But the bigger question is that it's an individual inquiry that, people would say this when I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, like, how on earth did you do that? People ask me who my hip surgeon was, like as if that was what got me up the mountain. And that played a part in it. You have to have like a good hip surgeon. But people were like, well, who was your hip surgeon to get you up that mountain? And I said, okay, listen, you don't have to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. You don't have to move to France. But what do you want to do? Do you even know? Do you even ask the question?
So I'm shocked how many people don't know. Yeah. And they get caught in the nuance of like, oh, well, I can but they don't actually stop to know. I had this really fortunate experience in that my dad was an entrepreneur and he made the decision in his 40s to sell his company. And he had a strong group of mentors around him. And before he did that, he's had the kind of conversation we're having right now where he's like, my identity is tied to the work that I've done with this company and I'm young. What am I doing? What is my purpose? What are my values? What's important to me? Because he's like, I suspect if I'm not clear on these things before I sell this, I'm going to sit there with some element of financial security and I'm going to just decompose. Like I'm going to be bored. I'm going to lose focus. I'm going to drink too much. He really was like, this is a huge problem. And he spent a ton of time like really understanding what he wanted his like post-exit life and contribution to look like before he made the leap. And then I have other individuals in my life who like, they've been pushing for retirement. They push for retirement. They get to retirement. And then they're like, I don't know what I want to do now. And so I took a lot from watching my dad move through this very intentional process of understanding what the next iteration of his identity needed to look like. And it was not that my identity needs to look like his, but the process and acknowledging that there will be this void and pre-planning for that from a mindset perspective was really powerful to witness. And like talking about this idea of parenting and like parents, like that was a really powerful process for me to watch him move through from a level of awareness for me. What is my identity going to look like when I don't see patients? What's it going to look like when I sell my business? I'm consulting for a business now and they're all talking about who's going to be speaking at their live event. And I was like, oh, I'm not speaking at their live event. And I realized that's a really important part of my identity. So sometimes these things come up and I'm in a point where I can realize what I want to do about that. I think these are really important considerations. I think sometimes we hold ourselves in places in life far too long because we just never stop to contemplate what it's going to look like on the other side. And I have already said I stayed in places far longer than I should, partly because I don't create the bandwidth to imagine what life could be like on the other side. I think it's important to me. I don't want to project that onto everyone else, but it's an opportunity for everybody to just contemplate what things are going to look like once you move through a transition. We gear up to the departure and then we don't think about what it's going to be like when we land in the new location.
Yeah, you said something really, well, you said a lot of things on point, but I want to come back to this sense of purpose because I think that's what we're talking about. And I think people get overwhelmed, like, I don't know what my purpose is. I'm like, you might have 15.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, go easy on yourself. You don't have to find this one, like maybe you don't have one soulmate purpose. Maybe you have 12, but start the inquiry. And in the work I do with my clients, how I shifted, how I doctor people, I think of them as my clients, not my patients, because I think of patients as more passive. I think of patients as like people who are in the hospital or might need a bigger intervention. And since I've been working online, I'm not providing that kind of care.
Right.
And so my patients are my clients, and it's more collaborative and it's more in partnership. But where I started to focus is on purpose, that it kind of didn't matter what I said to them, how I diagnosed, what blood work I pulled, what treatment plan I gave. It almost didn't matter. They weren't going to do it for more than maybe 6 weeks if they didn't know why.
Yes.
And it's not just why should I take these supplements, what's going on in my body, right? Yeah. But what is the point? Like, once people align health with purpose, that's when it all like opens up. Because now your health matters, because your health is now this support for you to live into one of your many purposes, whatever they might be.
Yeah, it's the enabler.
It's the enabler. And I want to know from you, because I feel like you live a very purpose-filled life. You are taking these risks in business, with your family, moving to Europe. Do you feel like you personally, like that is a huge benefit to your health?
100%. If I am not deriving purpose from my work, it's also a big red flag for me. And it's an important barometer of where I'm at with a project or the evolution of what I'm doing. I talked a lot about purpose and practice as well. And it was like part of my intake form. It was like part of the process. And the research around purpose is incredibly powerful around even what it does physiologically. It blunts cortisol curves. Like, individuals who identify as purpose heal faster. They have less risk for heart attack, less incidence of cancer. They recover more. Like, it is so profoundly important physiologically. And just like you said, we build it up, and I build it up. I talked about purpose for so long in practice. And then some days if you said to me right now, what is your purpose? I would have a blank answer. I'm like, I don't know. But I know it. I know when I'm living it, and I know when I'm doing it, and I know when I feel alive by it. And sometimes it's just a lens and it's a caveat, and it's finding meaning in the work that we do. My first business I ever had was I owned a cottage cleaning company because I didn't like having a boss. This should come as no surprise to anyone who's made it this deep into the podcast. And my dad was like, you have to work. Like, please don't think you're just going to sit on the dock all summer. And I looked across the lake and there was all these cottages on islands. And I was like, well, I am going to sit on the dock and I will work. He's like, if you can figure out how to have 2 things at once, go for it. And I was like, I got this. So I made little flyers and I put them in plastic containers and I put them on people's docks. And I was like, call me. And the whole thing behind that for me was these people work really hard and they've invested a lot to have this cottage on the island. And I know people on the mainland hire people from town, but I bet if you have a cottage on the island, you would love to have it cleaned when you show up on a Friday night in the dark, in your boat, in the rain with all your stuff. At least that's one less thing you have to do. And I was fully booked as like a cottage cleaning lady within 5 days. And then the next summer I hired 11 students to work for me. And I sat on the dock and I drove them out in the morning and I literally watched them all day long. And my dad was like, okay, 1, I don't think you'll ever work for anyone else again. But 2, you're meant to be an entrepreneur. And even in that moment, as we're having this discussion, and this is why this is relevant, it was really meaningful work for me. I was a cleaning lady who was like, I showed up and I worked hard. It was important to me that your space felt beautiful. When you walked in, I knew you were working hard doing your stuff all week long. And so I share this because I think someone can sit there and go, oh, it's easy for you. Like, you're a doctor. You can find purpose in what you do. I'm like, no, like, it's the lens through which you choose to view your work and contribution. And if you try it from all over angles and you can't find it, then that becomes a moment of introspection in and of itself. But contribution is powerful, but we need to pair it with the lens and framework. I mean, if I was cleaning cottages for arms dealers, I probably wouldn't derive the same sense of meaning, right? So, but seeing the look on people's faces when they showed up on Friday night and you did that for them, I was like, this is awesome. I love this. So it's hanging in front of everybody. You might just have to change the perspective through which you're viewing the work that you do.
Yeah. So one last little thought here, and then we'll wrap it up. It's been so great talking with you.
This is
So
so
I
fun.
use the phrase, welcome to your B-side. And this whole B-side idea started, I don't know, 6 years ago on a different podcast I had. And I would do these little shorts called the Dr. B-sides. And what that meant to me was so in music, I'm also a musician and an artist, and I worked in the music industry for a long time before going to naturopathic medical school. And B-sides are rarities, or they're where the artist takes a risk. And a lot of those songs on their B-sides are maybe their artistic risk, maybe they're more emotional, maybe they're more personal, and they're not necessarily going to be the hits, you know? And B-side is also, you know, chronologically like the second half of a vinyl record, for instance. So that's where I came up with all this. And so I talk a lot about midlife, but honestly, you could flip the record over at any point in time. What do you think your B-side is, or how do you see it now and into the future? What's the B-side of Megan Walker?
It's an interesting question, because if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I'd say it's this new venture that we're on. I feel like I'm creating a box set of B-sides right now. And I probably also would have said like moving to Europe and that unlocking that whole piece. I think even in I referenced this before, in making the decision to come here, we're like, well, we can always go back. And I think probably that B-side, not to make this sound boring and not specific, I think this iteration in this next chapter in my life, I'm going to spend less time hedging. And even if it's hedging emotionally, I feel confident in my ability to swim proverbially, that I'm going to just jump in more, like not just wet my toe and try it out and move to Europe for 3 months and then, okay, it's okay, I'm going to keep my house and go back and all the things, but like really fully immerse myself and jump in, whether that is relationships, whether that's how we move, whether that is this software startup that we've just launched, like not hedge it because I've got 3 other businesses that could probably support me on the side, but to like go all in and build something really big and really meaningful that'll have a legacy that's bigger than me. But I'm going to jump in with both feet.
I love that. That's a great place to wrap up this conversation, because it doesn't have a specific title or identity on it. It's a way of being. And that's what it's all about. It's our B-side is about our way of being. And that's the whole thing. Thank you so much for this conversation today. I think that it was beautiful to see you and so great to talk to you. And you're just wise and, all the things. And I can't wait to continue to see what you do next.
Thank you, friend. This has been such a pleasure.
This has been another episode of Welcome to Your B-Side, your midlife metamorphosis with Dr. Amy Lindsey. Be sure to follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.